Get a deeper connection with the Cougars of BYU sports.
God gives us a gift, and we use that gift until he takes it away.
Deep Blue.
Just sitting down afterward and being really tired and thinking like, wow, I just won the U.S. championship.
This is Deep Blue. Here's your host, Jason Shepard.
Thanks for tuning in to a brand new episode of Deep Blue. This is the show where we get to know the person behind the number that you see on the field or the court. These are the true stories of BYU athletes from their own mouths. My guest, former BYU and San Francisco 49er, current Cougar athletic director. You know him, you love him. He is Tom Holmoe. Tom, always good to see you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. It's good to share some time with you today.
We have got so much to talk to you about. You have lived quite the life, and you have had quite the experiences, and we want to get into all of them, but I want to start here. Can you believe it's been almost 20 years since you've been the athletic director at BYU?
It's gone super fast. Some people might think it's been way too long, but for me, it's gone fast. And I look back, and sometimes I'll go to games and like a volleyball game, and I'll see alums that were here 20 years ago, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that was a long time ago. And so I'm glad that I feel the way I do. I still have the energy that I feel that I have to give in order to be productive and do a good job as AD at BYU. But now, with all the things that are going on, that I'm sure we'll talk about some of them today, it's I kind of take it a day at a time, because there's so many things that are new, and you got to be on top of. You got to pay a lot of attention to. You got to focus. You got to choose priorities over a lot of potential options.
Yeah.
And it's a new day and age for college athletics.
Has that helped keep things fresh for you? I know certainly it can be stressful adding all of these things and scenarios that seem to change daily. But has that sort of helped keep it fresh for you?
I don't know if I'd say it keeps it fresh, but it keeps it alive. I think that there's challenges that we all are presented with each and every day in our jobs, no matter what job you have. And I think the approach that you wake up in the morning and you think about what you have to do that day. Some of the things are what we call compliant, meaning you just got to get it done. Other things are creative, where you know that if you really want to build for the future and have a vision and have dreams come true, you got to have dreams. Yeah. And you got to work on those day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And then sometimes they come true. And then there's other things where you just got to be ready to go. You wake up. And at BYU, especially this year with the Big 12, there's things that pop up that I think in 20 years I've said, I think I've seen it all. But I can't tell you how many times this year I've said, never seen that one before.
And it's probably not the last time you'll say that.
So fresh, I don't think it's fresh. I just think it's stay on your toes, use your team well, know that we have great resources, human and facility, all the different areas that we can be supported in, and go. It's just, I think that if that's the one thing I would say, Jason, is that I have to keep telling myself every day, let's go. Yeah. Let's go. And sometimes I'll be going from one thing to the other, and I got to give myself a pep talk. Let's go. This is going to be great. It's not routine. It's not redundant. It's not, oh no, here we go. It's like, let's get this thing done. This could be great.
You were the 2023 John L. Toner Award winner, and that's the annual award given out to the athletic director who has excelled at what he or she does. Obviously, people across the country, to steal from the Utah Jazz, have taken note on what you have done for BYU and the job that you've done. What did that award mean to you? What did you make of that?
It was a surprise to me. I understand what the award is, and I have had many peers that I have looked up to. Being in the business now for close to 20 years, there have been athletic directors that have come and gone before me who I've used as mentors, that they've been very supportive of me. I've been able to call them up and ask them questions. They've been able to write me a letter and say, hey, be careful, you might not want to do this. And they've won that award. And so when it was announced that I had won, I was surprised because I just guessed like 19 years of being an AD, the compilation of things put me in that position. But I was busy trying to meet and live up to what the standards were of those people that I admired. So I'm hoping in retrospect now that I've won it, that hopefully I've done enough to give back and pay forward other athletic directors in the business, and someday they might be able to think the same.
All right, let's go back 19 years. BYU is in a different place than it is now. There was a lot going on. Gary Croton was not going to come back as the head coach for the BYU football team. Val Hale was not going to be retained as the athletic director. Lots of things going on. What was that time like in the athletic department that ultimately led to you becoming the athletic director?
Well, I think it's time and place. I think that in my career, whether it's been I say career in sports, which started when I was in fourth grade. I've been associated with a team every year from fourth grade till now this year. I think that there's always change in sports. And so when I came to BYU, you could see that there was a time for change. I think the main thing was that there were two athletic departments, a men's department and a women's department. Yep. And I think, if I'm correct, it came down to there were three. I want to say Texas, Tennessee, and BYU were the last three that hadn't split and diverged into men's and women's. And at that time, it was a little bit complicated. I was in the athletic department in fundraising, but it was a little bit chunky and clunky. That was hard to get through all those things, and that was one of the things that I think we needed to adapt to and make a transition through. And I was there at the time, and I was asked to do that job. And that was the first item of business. That was one of the hardest things in the 19 years. But we were already good.
Yeah.
We already had really, really good men's and women's teams. We'd won a few national championships. We'd had great All-Americans, great professional athletes, coaches that had made it into the Hall of Fame, and an incredible tradition of BYU athletics, which includes Cougar Nation and all our fans and everything. So I came in at a time which was really good, and just tried to keep it going, and add something depending on what was going to come our way.
What was the first decision you made? Do you remember what that was?
No, I really can't. But I will share this just to tell you how overwhelming the thought may be. But I think it was early in my career, and maybe the first week or something. I'm not exactly sure. But I was going to a volleyball match, and one of the things that I was thinking that came into my mind is, I wonder if as the athletic director, did I have to put up the nets, or who's paying the officials? And that's how little I knew about being an athletic director. I started thinking about things that other people in our department did, but I didn't know. And so for these last 19 years, I've pretty much figured out what everybody does now. But I was a little bit panicked back in the day, not really knowing exactly what I could do to put myself to best use.
Yeah.
There's 1,000 things I could do, but that wouldn't be helpful to the department. So early on, I think when you ask what was the first thing, it's just like prioritizing the best things for the department, because there's so many things that you can get in over your head with and get down into the weeds with that are just going to keep you stalled.
Yeah.
And then there's some things you can do that make us better.
Well, and knowing what you are willing to do. I mean, you're out there shoveling snow, and you'll put on social media, hey, we need this done. I'll meet you out there. Have you ever put up a volleyball net in your time? Has it happened?
At practice, I have, yeah.
So you did get to put up the volleyball net. So certainly a little bit more important than putting up the volleyball net. But at that same time, we mentioned that the football program is going through a change, and you were part of the hiring process on finding that new football coach. You ultimately decided to promote Bronco Mendenhall, and I know you need to hire a coach quickly due to recruiting, but you also want to get it right. What was that decision like to go through, especially so early on in your tenure?
Well, it was critical. Everyone knows now, and they should have known then, that the decision that you make in hiring the head football coach and the men's basketball coach are really critical, because those are, one, the two revenue sports. We make money. We bring in money in a lot of other sports, but not enough to be in the black. But between football and basketball, pays for every other sport. And it is really the bell ringer of our athletic department is the football program.
Yeah.
Now, right now, our basketball team is doing great. And like I said, that's the second sport that really needs to be on the ball. So we just needed to get back to attention. What was it all about? It was critical. I knew it was an important one. And, to be a coach at BYU, a head coach, you have to be a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So the pool is relatively small. And I'm going to know every candidate, possible candidate, because if they are going to have some type of experience in the game, then you're going to know them. They're going to be in college or pro, and there are some options. And I think that was one of the first times where you see candidates that could potentially do the job, but it's a matter of picking the best one.
Right.
And sometimes the best one, doesn't really rise to the surface right away. And I think that initially Bronco and I, in our conversation, we really didn't come to an immediate agreement that, hey, this is going to be it. You're going to be the guy. And I'm not so sure that he wanted to be the guy. And it took a couple days, and that seemed like forever. But it took a couple days for Bronco and I to be able to come to terms on what this job was all about.
Well, what sold both of you then on it, ultimately?
I mean, it's deep, and it's really deep, and there were things that are I would even call them sacred, things that we talked about and discussions that we had that we looked at each other at one point in time and said, hey, this is it. It's you and me. Let's go. We can do this together. And when I say that, there's a lot of factors. Look, the football coach pulls all the strings and has a lot to do, but the athletic director and by virtue of my staff and all my team and everything, we're there to support the coaches. So I knew really initially that he had some things that were really special for BYU that a lot of people wouldn't know, and they would have to come out. People would have to learn to appreciate the things that Bronco would bring. And Bronco's different than Coach Croton, Coach Lavelle Edwards, and Coach Kalani. And they're different from all coaches have their strengths, and all coaches have their weaknesses or biases. And I just think in the time that Bronco was here, you saw a lot of the greatness come out.
Well, and you said that the hiring of the football coach and the men's basketball coach, you got to get those right. And you absolutely did. The hiring of Bronco turned out to be a massive move, and certainly something that BYU, it paid dividends, certainly. Dave Rose for the men's basketball team, both of those hires were slam dunks. Now, at the time, you're probably wondering how it's going to go, but now looking back on it, you nailed both of those hires.
Well, I thank you. I appreciate that, but I think that a lot of it is a lot of prayer and go, hope these are the two guys. Hope these guys are the ones. Look, we've had stability in our athletic department and the program for a long time, and I think that a lot of it comes down to that consistency, that we've had two men's basketball coaches and two football coaches in the 19 years.
Yeah.
And that has helped so much because you don't have the transitions of changing multiple coaches as you shift staffs from year to year. You have an opportunity to become comfortable with a style. You can establish traditions and cultures that are so meaningful in this day and age. And I think all four of those coaches, when you talk about Coach Rose, Coach Pope, Coach Mendenhall, and Coach Satake, they're four great men who have what it takes. They had the it factor. Mark was the only one that had been a head coach at the college level, but he had been here at BYU, and so I'd been around him a little bit. And the other three hadn't. That's the one thing. Can they do it as a head coach at the college level? Dave had been a high school head coach and a junior college head coach. Bronco and Coach Croton had great experience in college and pro ball.
What was your vision for the department? Did you even get that far, or were you just sort of, like you had mentioned, just sort of trying to tread water until you kind of figured out how this thing worked? Did you go in with a vision, or was that something that you were able to formulate as you went through your tenure?
It's hard to describe. I'll try and do the best I can, but we had some kind of business and management and leadership people that I'm familiar with that came, and they helped me along the way, as far as helping be organized and putting together a business. This is a big business, which I'd never done before. But, I think my goal And the dream and the vision that I had right from the start was I knew what it took at BYU because I was here.
Yeah.
I was here during a golden era where Lavelle was the coach. And you had Coach Arnold that was a coach when I was here for a while. And you had Danny Ainge, and you had all the football superstars at the time. And like my belief is, and it still is to this day, BYU Athletics is about the players and the coaches. That's it. I mean, and that's where all of my attention lies to this day. The sooner I was able to draw my attention away from fundraising and marketing and sponsorship and taping, whatever things that we have to do in the athletic department, and focus my attention on what I call the secret sauce, and that is the kids. And that comes down to recruiting the right stuff. This is what we call the fit. Mm-hmm. And that's magical to BYU. If you get the right kids, if you bring in the right kids, BYU's culture is already there. You plug them in. Now you can plug them into this culture, and if you get the right ones, they'll take off. I think that I've been to other schools before that have very good cultures, but it's not almost turnkey. And I think at BYU, we should be really good from the start. You know, to be great, it takes a little bit more. But I just think focusing the attention, it's not about me, it's not about my team, it's not about other things, it's about those players. And one of the things that I love to do is go down into practices when in the Merit Center or out at practice and on football field and just see the guys and the coaches. That's it. There's no media around. There's no fans around. There's no family around. It's just the love of the game. And that's my bliss, is seeing all these people that chose BYU. We chose them, and they chose us. And that's the magic of it. So when you say at the beginning, what was your dream? Bring that back. Yeah. Put the attention on the players and the coaches and let them run.
As you said, you know BYU. You are uniquely qualified to talk about BYU on many different levels. You were a player here. You were a coach here. You're now the athletic director here. Maybe this is not an easy question to answer, but what does BYU mean to you? What has it meant to you?
Well, BYU has changed my life. I mean, I grew up in L.A., and I was not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was a member of another faith. And, I got injured in high school, and I thought I wouldn't have ended up at BYU if I hadn't got hurt. And when I got hurt, I had to kind of take a deeper look at other schools, and BYU did a really, really good job of recruiting me with Coach Edwards and Fred Whittingham and Dick Felt. The three of them kind of put the full court press on and got me to come to BYU. And then that's where the story really starts. I know I came up here. It just changed me in every way. I met my wife. After I left BYU, I learned about the church, but I joined the church 6 years after I left. It was in the summer before, or off season before my last year with the 49ers. And while I was here, I just learned so much, and I changed my heart. I changed the way I thought. And I had a couple little kids, and I learned that things were going to be different for me me and my family, only if I let out that way. So I don't know if I ever would have been able to do the things that I wanted to do if I hadn't come to BYU. So having said that, I feel like I had a 10 out of 10 experience at BYU, and I want every recruit that comes to BYU, I want every student, even if they're not playing ball, to feel like it was a 10 out of 10. And I really believe that you can make it happen. This is a magical place. And I really believe that if you come with an open mind and an open heart and you really put everything that you have into it, it's going to work. It's going to work out great.
You touched on a couple things that we are going to get into coming up, but we're going to take a quick break. We will have more with BYU Athletic Director Tom Holmoe when we return to the Deep Blue Podcast on BYU Radio. Welcome back to the Deep Blue Podcast. Jason Shepard with you. My guest today is BYU Athletic Director Tom Holmoe. And Tom, you were talking about growing up in California. You were not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Before we get to all of that and coming to BYU, what was life like for you growing up in Southern California?
Camelot. It was awesome. I lived in a place called La Crescenta. It's kind of a little suburb of L.A., nestled in between like Glendale and Pasadena up in the hills. I like to say when they show the Rose Bowl and they always show the hills, that's up where I lived. And I lived about 150 yards from a park that had hoops and a field that you could play football and baseball and run. And we played games morning, noon, and night. I grew up on every field. We played every sport. We had neighborhoods that had tons and tons of kids. And so the neighbors were our family. They were dear, dear friends, but we considered them family. We loved each other. We played. We went to school. It was an idyllic place for me to grow up.
So you lettered in 3 sports. What were the 3 sports? What were the other sports besides football that you lettered in?
Football, basketball, and track.
So was it always football for you? Was that always top of the list, or could you have envisioned yourself going a different direction?
No, football is always number one. I mean, I played baseball and swam, and we played every sport. Sure. You just did everything. Whatever the Parks and Rec guys would throw out there, you would do it. Soccer, there's a ball. But, it's interesting. Some people felt that my best sport was baseball, but I wasn't really – it didn't turn me on. I mean, it was slow, and I love the game, and I still watch it, and I still follow my San Francisco Giants deep. But when it came to high school, I had 3 sports that I was going to play.
You also had, and you mentioned how you played all sports, but your other family members. You had an older brother that went to UCLA, and if memory serves, because I had interviewed you. I don't expect you to remember this, but it was at least 10 years ago. I was still at KSL, and we were doing a story on your conversion story that we were going to run in between General Conference. And if memory serves, you said that your goal, like your number one school, was UCLA. That's where you wanted to go. Was that because your brother went there or for other reasons?
Oh, yeah, it's because of my brother. He was 9 years older than me, Steve, and he was bigger than me. He was a linebacker, and he was the star of our town, and he played baseball. He was a great baseball player, too, and football. And, yeah, he taught me everything. He taught me how to run, how to field, how to catch, how to throw, how to bat, how to hit, all the things. He taught me the psychological parts of the game. When there was no – you've heard of sports psychology – but I'm growing up in 69, 70, 71, 72. He was teaching me sports psychology when I was a young buck. And after he got hurt, he fractured a vertebrae in his neck in the Stanford UCLA game his freshman year. And from that time, that was his last game, he couldn't play anymore. And so he took me under his wing and said, look, same thing's not going to happen to you. You're going to have academics, and you're going to have Plan A is academics. Plan B is sports. And so I grew up balanced. He gave me a lot of balance and helped me in that regard and pushed me hard and challenged me hard. And I don't think I ever would have been able to achieve any of the athletic or academic goals that I have if it wasn't for him.
You had referenced in the previous segment an injury that you dealt with. Take me through the injury that you suffered in high school.
Last game of my senior year, well, it was our last regular season game for the championship, and the guy stepped on my finger and shattered it, and I had to have surgery. It was actually the last game before our championship game, so I didn't get to play in the last game, but had to have surgery right away. My hand was in a big ball. A lot of schools had dropped me like a hot potato. And if I would have been offered by UCLA, I would have gone to UCLA just because of my brother Steve, and it was the L.A. school.
Sure.
And I grew up living and dying with John Wooden and all the Wooden basketball teams and UCLA football. So that's how it is. I think it's interesting that was a turning point in my life, was I took this adversity, which was a broken hand, people dropped me, and I did the next best thing, which was BYU. I really had no idea where BYU was. I knew a little bit about Gifford Nielsen. That's the only player that I could really ever tell you about. I had friends in my neighborhood and in my school who were members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they were great people. So I had a positive impression about BYU. Mm-hmm. And when I got hurt and started getting recruited, and I started telling them, hey, I'm getting recruited by BYU, they're going, you should go. It's a great school. That's where it all started.
Okay, so you said that the BYU coaches put the full court press on you. What was the selling point to you? Why did they want you at BYU?
I just think that they felt, they were good. They were up and coming, had produced a bunch of All-Americans already, had won a conference championships, and they were looking to extend. At that point in time, they expanded their recruiting beyond the Wasatch Front into California and Arizona. I don't think they were going around the country at that time. And, they went down and found kids that would fit. This is what I'm saying. I thought I was a good fit for BYU. When I got up here, I didn't feel like a fish out of water, but I was a little bit different, not being a member of this church. But I could see how they had done their homework. And as I talked to my high school coaches, years after and said, what did you say to them about me? And they said, you'd fit up at BYU.
What was the reaction of others, whether it be family, friends, when you said, I'm going to Provo, I'm going to play for BYU?
Nobody wanted me to come to BYU. My family, mom and dad, brother and sister, aunts and uncles, my friends, my coaches, nobody. And I think that's another part of it that I think was important in this feeling of me making it at BYU was I made a decision to come here that went against everybody else's judgment. My mom and dad and brother and sister, everybody was supportive after I made it, but it was not the choice they wanted. And so when I came up here, it was on me. And I knew that if things didn't go right, it was on me. I couldn't blame it on, hey, Mom, you made me go to BYU or made me go somewhere else. So, man, I had some good choices, but I just surprised everyone by pulling BYU out of a hat. And I really didn't pull it out of a hat. It was really deep in my heart at that time. And I made the decision, and when I said it out loud for the first time, I couldn't believe I said it. But from the time I said I'm going to BYU, that was it. And I was going to be all in from then till. And I had some rough patches at BYU, but I knew that was my commitment. I'm going to make it work.
Okay, now I'm really curious because, as you mentioned, UCLA did not offer, and that would have been the school that you would have gone to. But knowing that they were not an option, where did your family want you to go if it wasn't BYU? Did they have a school in mind?
Yeah, Harvard or Air Force Academy.
Because you were recruited by Harvard, Oregon, Air Force, and Washington State, right?
Yeah, right. Those were my trips.
So they wanted you to go to Harvard or the Air Force.
Yeah, I mean those. I was a good student,
sure.
And they felt that academics first. My mom and dad and sister were supportive as well academically. Education was super important to our family. So when I wasn't going to go to UCLA, they were like, take the academic route. And little did they know that BYU was going to turn into a great academic institution. Yeah. So it's fun for me today to see BYU in the rankings so high and so respected across the world for the graduates that are entering into the job market and into communities. And people want the BYU students. I just knew that ahead of everybody else.
What role did religion play in your life growing up?
A very strong role. My mom and dad were very active in our church, and so was I. We had great faith in Jesus Christ, and we would read the Bible. We would pray.
You were a Lutheran church, correct?
Church, yeah. And so we had a strong background. I'm Norwegian. All of my aunts and uncles were Norwegian or Finnish, and that's just our background. Everyone went to the Lutheran church, and it was a change. It was hard. When I came to BYU and started having these feelings and the Spirit started speaking to me, it was hard. I didn't want to go against tradition and the culture that my family had grown I had grown so close to in my family. So that was a hard time for me, and I appreciate the fact that I had to go through those wrestles and be able to find out for myself that this is the church that I want to belong to. This is the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I want to be all the way in. You can kind of get that feeling. I like to make commitments. once I make a decision, I want to stick with it.
All right, let's talk about the football because as you mentioned, this is BYU was known, but it still wasn't BYU like we know it today. But it was getting there. So, what were those early years for you like on the football team? And as the program got bigger and got more and more successful, what was that like to be a part of?
It was wonderful, and I love what you just said. You said to be a part of. I was a part of something bigger than me. And that's how it was when I was in high school. I played on a very successful football, basketball, and track program. But I had a role. I played a role. I was never really the star. Maybe my senior year, but even then, we had a couple D1 kids that came out after that. And I just learned, coaches taught me, you play a role and you play it well, you're going to get more. We'll give you more. And so when I came to BYU, I was well trained in playing the role that the coaches give you, do all that you can to help the team and belong, fit into the team. And there's no better feeling than being on a team where you feel you're a big part of the team. Not only are you a part of their success, but you're a part of the fabric of the team. And at BYU, people will have a hard time believing that, but we were super close and tight. And I'm saying you have guys like a number of return missionaries, which I had no idea what that meant. We had kids on our team that were married and had children, and then we had people that were not members of the faith. A lot's been said about Jim McMahon. I think Jim McMahon is one of my favorite teammates that I've ever had, ever, from fourth grade till today. And it was because he gave everything to this team.
Yeah.
He put it all on the line. And when you could play with him and be with him and feel his energy and enthusiasm, he and Lavelle had a great affection for each other, and he had an affection for the team. And I caught that when I was here from Jim and many, many other players.
What was the dynamic like between the offense and the defense? Because you mentioned a guy like Jim McMahon. BYU, for the longest time, and probably still to this day, regardless of what anything that happens on the defensive side, will still be looked at as an offensive school. What was it like to be a defensive player at an offensive school like BYU?
It was just fine. Hey, look, I'm going to just say, offense, we won a ton of games. We had great. Think about this: Giff Nielsen, Mark Wilson, Jim McMahon, Steve Young, 4 quarterbacks in a row who are in the College Football Hall of Fame. Yep. I don't know if there's another school in the country that can say that. 4 quarterbacks in a row that were Hall of Fame, College Hall of Famers. I just know that. How were we? We were fine. We were one team. But like one thing I can remember is you'd come off the bench, you get a quick sip of water, and then you'd go take a knee and watch. You didn't want to miss watching those guys light up the board. And it was just not just the quarterbacks, but the offense at the time was magical. And we did things that nobody could understand. They couldn't figure it out. It took them decades to figure it out. And we would literally just sit there like everybody else in the stadium and watch.
Yeah.
And I used to do that when I got to San Francisco watching Montana. Yeah. And I was used to saying, like, hey, I'm not sitting on the bench. I'm going to go see what's going on. I won't miss this.
Well, and you were part of an era that has produced not just on the field type players. You know, we mentioned the McMahon and Young. I mean, go through all of the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. But now you have guys like Holmgren, and certainly someone that I'm very fond of, Andy Reid. You know, all these guys have their BYU ties. That has got to be so much fun to see all of the guys around the professional sports with BYU ties being as successful as they are, or for those that maybe aren't doing it anymore, as they were.
Yeah, I love that part. And you could throw in a ton of names, and I'm not even going to start. You mentioned a few of them. But there's a couple common threads, and one is BYU. Yep. The second is Lavelle Edwards. And I just won't get tired of speaking about my coach, Lavelle, our coach, how he crafted a group of men, young men and older men, together in a period of time where we just accomplished things on and off the field that, like, I'm going to keep using this word, are magical, because I've been around a lot of football. And I've seen great teams at other places. I've seen dynasties and continue to see them today. But that's what we had. Yeah. And that's what we're in the midst of. If you look at the whole program at BYU, it's still something that is really something special. And we haven't been in the CFP, haven't been to the number 1 spot since '84. It's a long time. But some have never been there. Yep. And I think that people can appreciate the totality of the program. And that totality starts with Lavelle.
Before we wrap things up, I do want to ask you, I've had the pleasure many, many times to talk with your wife and to be around your wife, and she is so nice. Take me through the process of meeting her and what that moment was like for you, and what she meant to you then and what she means to you now.
Well, we met at BYU. I was playing football, and she was a cheerleader. I really didn't know her when I was playing football, but in the off season, when I recruited we would recruit football players and we'd take them to the basketball games. You remember in the old Marriott Center, they have the dugouts, where the some fans sat below the court level. There was one little piece in the inside where the cheerleaders would duck into, and I had a seat that was 1A right next to there. And Norm Chow was the recruiting coordinator at the time, and being not a member of the church, I was the one guy that recruited all the non-members. I was a good recruiter. And so he would say, hey, can you recruit this weekend? I would say, you give me seat 1A. And he goes, all right. After a while, he said, okay, I figured it out. I know why you want that seat 1A. So I'd start talking to Lori, my wife, and that's how we met. And, we had a friendship that blossomed into love, and we fell in love and got married.
There we go. All right. More on that and a lot more coming up. We've got a lot to talk with Tom Holmoe about. This is just part one of our two-part episode. In our next episode, we're going to talk about your career in the NFL and your eventual conversion to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Josh Bergstrom and Ben Hall produced this episode. Deep Blue's senior producer is Cleon Wall. You can download and subscribe to Deep Blue on all podcast platforms or find all episodes on the BYU Radio app. Deep Blue is a production of BYU Radio.